Hey everyone. So sorry I couldn't be there in person for class. We had a vacation this last weekend, then we're moving to Minnesota. Really wish I could have gotten to known all of you in person or virtually, but in the meantime, I am going to create a few short videos just going over what you've learned in class thus far and then my understanding of the topic. So today I'm going to go over credibility, transferability, and consistency. So is qualitative research reliable or valid? Now, these are two terms that you'll hear often in quantitative research, but not so much in qualitative research. Reliability refers to whether an analysis produces results independent from whoever conducted the study. So what does this mean? An example is a reliable survey instrument should produce the same information regardless of which researcher administers it. Validity, on the other hand, measures whether or not the researcher's analysis measures what the researcher says they are measuring. So an example of this would be a valid survey instrument effectively measures student dropout behaviors and factors which contribute to dropping out instead of measuring something that's not related to dropout, such as a student's satisfaction with school. So in answer to the question, is qualitative research reliable or valid? Uh, Not really, maybe. So let's take, for example, the website Rotten Tomatoes. So on this website, they create an aggregate score to represent how many reviewers had an overall positive view or review of a movie. Now here we have The Dark Knight, which is objectively the best movie ever, and it somehow only scored a 94% on Rotten Tomatoes. So what reviewers do when they review a movie is they basically approach it like a study. They watch the movie and then take notes based on how they felt the movie was. Here you'll see two different reviewers. One had a very positive review of The Dark Knight and said he didn't even realize it was a superhero movie. Whereas the other person said too much psychology and not enough pop. It's impossible to be too serious, you know? Now, this represents why qualitative research, which basically reviewing a movie is, it's two people or individuals reviewing a film and then giving their analysis of whether or not they thought it was a good film. And this shows why qualitative research may not be reliable in terms of how we look at quantitative instruments, where if we had a quantitative instrument that we could somehow use to review The Dark Knight, you would expect that instrument to get the same score every single time. Where in qualitative research, the researcher is part of the study. They are an instrument that's used to measure whatever they're attempting to measure or study. And each qualitative interviewer or researcher may not have the same results every time, which is why reliability and validity don't typically apply to qualitative work. Instead, we ask, can qualitative research be credible? And as Ted Lasso says here, yes. Now, credibility measures how vivid and faithful the description of a phenomenon is. Also, can qualitative research be transferable? Transferability, or otherwise known as fittingness, measures how well the analysis fits into a context other than the one study. Or can the results of the study inform other context or research? Back to our example of The Dark Knight. Now, are these reviews credible? Do they measure how vivid and faithful the description of the phenomenon is? And are they transferable? So do these fit in other contexts? In this case, these two reviewers, who are individuals who approach movies differently, are giving different reviews, but I assume if we were to read their entire reviews of the movie, that there would be a credible description and vivid and faithful description of how they are experiencing the phenomenon. Now, is this transferable? And this comes down to me as a consumer of movies. I may look at reviewer two, Ryan, who says too much psychology and not enough pop. I love superhero movies. And I love when people delve into the psychology of superheroes and what makes them tick, and vice versa with villains like the Joker here and what makes them tick. So, looking at how reviewer two analyzed this movie, I may determine that their analyses are not transferable to my interest in movies and choose not to use their interpretation of movies in the future and instead look for someone like Glenn here who enjoys my type of superhero movie and analyzes movies the same way I may. So I would say that Glenn's analysis is transferable to my context as a movie watcher, whereas Ryan's analyses may match better with someone else who prefers their superhero movies to be more poppy and not as serious. Lastly, can qualitative research be consistent? So consistency, or otherwise known as audibility, is the ability of another investigator to follow the decision or audit trail and replicate the study in other contexts. Now, like I said with the reviewers here, I can watch the movie and have a completely different interpretation, such as these two did. But if I take effective notes and then also reflect on my positionality and reflexivity, then I can hopefully provide an accurate roadmap for someone else to see the research I did and why I may have came to the conclusions that I did in my study. So positionality and reflexivity involve reflecting on the research process and how your own identities may impact the study. So here, Ryan is telling us, and I assume in the full review, they would hopefully be more clear about this, that they don't like serious superhero movies, which is part of their reflexibility. That's part of their positionality as a researcher, which is important in qualitative research because we're not developing a tool or instrument that measures objective fact. Instead, we, the researchers, are the tool that is evaluating, studying, researching a phenomenon in a certain context that may only apply to other certain contexts. So lastly, and I'm happy to meet with any of you and talk this through a little bit more, and I hope I was clear, but I have some tips for producing credible qualitative research, and this is adapted from an article that I'll share as well. Keep detailed research journals and notes describing why you made the choices you did, such as sampling, site selection, or theory. And use credible literature to inform your choices, not just textbooks. So the textbook we're using is 2018. There may have been several advances in the literature up until now that aren't present in the textbook that you can get from looking at a journal such as Qualitative Research, or looking at relevant higher education journals such as Community College Review or Journal of Community College Research and Practice. Second, collect multiple forms of data, which is also known as triangulation, which I'll make a separate video about how to properly triangulate in a study, to determine congruence of your results. So for example, you could collect interview data, observation data, and then also analyze public reports or press releases of a certain phenomenon. Third, review study results with participants, also known as member checking, to ensure that you're accurately describing what they portrayed to you in their interview. With other researchers to ensure that your analyses and interpretation of the data matches with the field, or just to have a discussion further about how you may be analyzing something in a way that another researcher may not. And then also compare your findings with the literature, and then contrast and discuss those within your study, and then your report or dissertation in this case. 4, reflect on your positionality during all phases of the study. How does your background, your identities, your experiences impact your choice to study topic X? Your participant recruitment and site selection, the ways you develop interview protocols, and then how participants may interact with you. Are there any power dynamics there? Are you interviewing folks from a similar background to you where the interview may go differently than it would if you were an outsider researching a certain population? Does your background affect how you may be analyzing the data because you do have experiences similar to your research participants or vastly different than your research participants? And then lastly, be clear on how your findings may or may not inform other research, policy, and practice. So are your findings transferable? Say if I'm doing a study on community colleges in California, which I'm conducting one right now, those findings may not be transferable to a community college system in New York, because the policies and context are completely different. Whereas the findings from my California study may apply directly to Oregon, who may have a community college system that runs or is governed by similar policies, systems, or guidelines and has a similar student population as that of California. So thank you so much for listening to me, and please reach out to schedule a meeting or talk more if you would like. Have a great night.